In the heart of New Mexico, where the desert meets the mountains, and ancient traditions clash with modern life, a story unfolds that will touch your soul. This is the tale of Aiyana, a young Apache girl who lost more than just her appetite when tragedy struck her family, and Marcus, a lonely rancher who discovered that sometimes healing comes not from medicine, but from understanding the language of the heart and the kitchen. If you're ready for a story that will make you believe in the power of human connection, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. The silent child of the morning sun cast long shadows across the Riverside Children's Home in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Social worker Sarah Martinez walked through the hallway, her footsteps echoing against the polished floors. She paused outside room 12, taking a deep breath before knocking gently. "Aiyana, breakfast is ready, sweetheart." Silence. Sarah opened the door to find the same scene she'd witnessed for the past 3 weeks. 12-year-old Aiyana sat by the window, her dark eyes fixed on the distant Sandia Mountains. Her breakfast tray from the previous evening remained untouched on the nightstand. Scrambled eggs, now cold and congealed. Toast hard as cardboard. "Aiyana, please," Sarah said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You have to eat something. The doctors are worried about you." The girl's thin frame seemed to shrink further into the oversized sweater she wore. 3 weeks had passed since the car accident that claimed her grandmother's life, her only remaining family member. 3 weeks since she'd spoken a word, or taken more than a few reluctant bites of food. Dr. Chen had run every test imaginable. "There's nothing physically wrong with her," he'd told Sarah the day before. "This is psychological. She's retreating into herself. And if we don't find a way to reach her soon." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah had seen cases like this before, though never quite this severe. The girl was literally wasting away from grief. "The state wants to place her in a specialized facility," Sarah's supervisor, Janet, had said during their morning meeting, "somewhere with psychiatric care." "She doesn't need a hospital," Sarah argued. "She needs a home. A real home, where someone understands her." "Sarah, be realistic. We've had her for 3 weeks. No one's been able to connect with her. She won't eat, won't speak, barely sleeps. What kind of foster family could handle that?" Sarah looked at her case files, her mind racing. Then she remembered a conversation from 6 months ago with Marcus Thompson, a widowed rancher who'd been trying to become a foster parent. He'd mentioned something about wanting to help a child who really needed it, someone other families might overlook. "I might know someone," she said quietly. That afternoon, Sarah drove her silver Honda through the winding roads of rural New Mexico. The landscape shifting from suburban sprawl to open desert dotted with juniper and pinyon trees. Marcus Thompson's ranch sat in a valley between 2 mesas, a modest spread with a weathered farmhouse and a few outbuildings. Marcus emerged from the barn as she pulled up, wiping his hands on a work rag. At 52, he was tall and lean, with prematurely gray hair and kind eyes that had seen their share of sorrow. He'd lost his wife Aiyana to cancer 3 years ago, and their own struggles with infertility had left him longing for a child to care for. Sarah, he greeted her with a warm smile. "Good to see you. How can I help?" "I have a case I wanted to discuss with you," she said, accepting his offer of coffee on the front porch. "A 12-year-old Apache girl named Aiyana. She's been through a tremendous trauma, and she's not responding to conventional care." Marcus listened intently as Sarah described the girl's situation. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the desert landscape. "What makes you think I could help her when the professionals can't?" he asked finally. "Because you understand loss," Sarah replied. "And because ... She hesitated, then continued. "Your wife Aiyana was part Native American, wasn't she? You mentioned once that she taught you about her heritage." Marcus nodded slowly. "Her grandmother was Navajo. Aiyana learned some of the old ways from her. She always said there was healing in the traditional foods, in the connection to the land and the ancestors. Maybe that's what this girl needs. Not therapy sessions or medication, but someone who understands that healing comes in many forms." Marcus stood up, walking to the porch railing. "I don't know anything about being a father, Sarah, Aiyana and I. We tried for years. But you know about caring for something that needs healing," Sarah said gently. "I've seen how you care for injured animals, how you nurse sick cattle back to health. Sometimes children aren't so different." The next morning, Marcus drove to the children's home, his truck loaded with a few supplies and his heart heavy with uncertainty. Sarah met him at the entrance, her expression both hopeful and worried. "She hasn't eaten anything in 2 days," she whispered as they walked down the hallway. The doctors want to force-feed her if she doesn't start eating soon. They found Aiyana in the same position by the window, her small body almost lost in the institutional chair. Marcus felt his heart break, looking at her. She couldn't weigh more than 70 pounds, her cheekbones sharp against her pale brown skin. Aiyana, Sarah said gently. This is Marcus. He'd like to talk to you. The girl didn't acknowledge their presence, but Marcus noticed something. Her eyes weren't completely vacant, they held a fierce intelligence. A stubborn will that reminded him of a wild animal protecting itself. Marcus pulled up a chair beside her, not too close, and sat down. He didn't speak immediately, instead, following her gaze out the window to the mountains beyond. Those are the Sandia Mountains, he said quietly. Sandia means watermelon in Spanish, because they turn pink and red at sunset. My ranch is about an hour from here, closer to those mountains. You can see them real clear from my front porch. Aiyana's eyes flickered slightly, the first sign of awareness anyone had seen from her in days. I've got a horse named Storm, Marcus continued, his voice soft and unhurried. She's getting old, but she's gentle. Needs someone to brush her coat and talk to her. Horses are good listeners. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small piece of turquoise, smooth and polished. This was my wife's. She always said turquoise was protection for travelers, that it would keep you safe on long journeys. He set the stone on the windowsill where Aiyana could see it. She would have wanted you to have it. For the first time in 3 weeks, Aiyana turned her head slightly, her eyes focusing on the turquoise stone. Her fingers twitched as if she wanted to reach for it, but couldn't quite make herself do it. Would you like to come see the ranch? Marcus asked. Just for a visit. Storm would like to meet you. Aiyana looked at him then, really looked at him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that made him catch his breath. It wasn't hope not yet, but it was acknowledgement. She saw him, and in that moment, he understood that this wasn't going to be about fixing her or saving her. It was about earning her trust. One small step at a time. The drive to Marcus's ranch took them through landscapes that seemed to shift and change with each mile. Aiyana sat in the passenger seat of his pickup truck, still silent but alert, her fingers clutching the turquoise stone he'd given her. She watched the city give way to open desert, the Sandia Mountains growing larger and more imposing against the clear blue sky. Marcus drove carefully, stealing glances at the girl beside him. She was so small, so fragile, that he worried she might simply disappear if he looked away too long. But there was something in her posture now, a slight straightening of her spine as they drew closer to the mountains, that gave him hope. That's my place, he said as they turned into a gravel driveway marked by a simple wooden sign. Thompson Ranch. The house was a modest adobe structure with a wraparound porch and a red tile roof. Behind it, a barn and several outbuildings dotted the landscape, all set against the dramatic backdrop of the desert mountains. Aiyana's eyes took in everything, the windmill turning slowly in the afternoon breeze, the chickens pecking in the yard, the old blue heeler dog that came trotting up to greet them. That's Jake, Marcus said as the dog approached the truck. He's been with me for 8 years. Lost his hearing last year, but he's still the best ranch dog I've ever had. When they got out of the truck, Jake sniffed at Aiyana's feet, tail wagging. She remained perfectly still, but Marcus noticed she didn't flinch away from the dog's attention. Come on, Marcus said. Let me show you around. He led her to the barn first, where Storm, a gentle bay mare with a white star on her forehead, stood in her stall. The horse lifted her head as they approached, nickering softly. She's 23 years old, Marcus explained, opening the stall door. My wife Aiyana used to ride her every day. Storm's been lonely since Aiyana died. I think she misses having someone to talk to. Aiyana stepped closer to the stall, her eyes fixed on the horse. Storm stretched her neck toward the girl, and for a moment, it seemed like she might reach out to touch the mare's nose. But then she pulled back, wrapping her arms around herself. It's okay, Marcus said gently. She'll be here when you're ready. They walked back to the house as the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Marcus showed Aiyana to the guest room, a small, comfortable space with a window that looked out toward the barn. He'd prepared it as best he could, with fresh linens and a few books on the nightstand. Are you hungry? He asked as she stood in the doorway, looking around the room. She shook her head almost imperceptibly, but Marcus had expected that. Sarah had warned him about her refusal to eat, and he'd spent the morning thinking about what Aiyana would have done. I'm going to make some dinner anyway, he said. If you change your mind, you're welcome to join me. In the kitchen, Marcus pulled out ingredients he'd bought that morning, after researching traditional Apache foods online. He wasn't sure if what he was planning would work, but he had to try something different from the institutional meals she'd been refusing. He started with blue corn, grinding it by hand, the way Aiyana had taught him. The cornmeal had a different texture than the store-bought kind, heartier and more substantial. He mixed it with water and a little salt, forming it into small cakes that he cooked on a cast iron griddle. Next, he prepared peppery beans that he'd soaked overnight. He cooked them slowly with wild onions and a touch of honey, the way Aiyana's grandmother had shown her. The kitchen filled with a warm, earthy aroma that was nothing like the sanitized smell of the children's home. As he worked, Marcus found himself thinking about Aiyana, about the stories she'd told him of her great-grandmother, who had taught her to cook traditional foods even though she'd grown up in the city. Food is memory, Aiyana had said. It connects us to our people, to our history. When we eat the foods our ancestors ate, we remember who we are. He was just finishing the meal when he heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Aiyana appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the smell of the cooking food. She stood there for a moment, her eyes wide, before taking a hesitant step into the room. "Smells different, doesn't it?" Marcus said, not looking directly at her as he arranged the food on 2 plates. "My wife's great-grandmother used to make corn cakes like these. Said they were the same ones her people had been making for hundreds of years." Aiyana moved closer, her nostrils flaring slightly as she caught the scent of the beans and corn. Marcus could see the conflict in her face, her body's desperate need for nourishment, warring with whatever was keeping her from eating. "You don't have to eat if you don't want to," he said, setting 1 plate on the table. "But I thought you might like to see how it's made." He showed her the blue cornmeal, still coarse from the grinding. "This corn is sacred to many native peoples. It's not just food, it's a connection to the earth, to the ancestors who cultivated it." Aiyana reached out tentatively, touching the cornmeal with her fingertip. When she brought it to her lips, Marcus saw her eyes widen in recognition. It was as if she was tasting a memory, something from deep in her past. "Your grandmother," Marcus said softly. "Did she ever make anything like this?" "For the first time in 3 weeks," Aiyana nodded. It was barely perceptible, but it was there. And then, so quietly that Marcus almost missed it, she whispered, and Marcus's heart nearly stopped. Those were the first words she'd spoken since the accident. "What does that mean?" he asked gently. "Grandmother," Aiyana said, her voice barely audible. She made ... She made corn cakes. For ceremonies. For when I was sad." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes, but he kept his voice steady. "Would you like to try one? I don't know if I made them right, but I tried to remember what Aiyana taught me." Aiyana looked at the plate, then at Marcus, then back at the food. Slowly, she reached out and broke off a small piece of corn cake. She held it for a moment, as if weighing whether to trust it, then placed it on her tongue. The taste hit her like a flood of memories, her grandmother's kitchen. The smell of wood smoke and sage, the feeling of being safe and loved. Tears began to stream down her cheeks, but she didn't stop eating. She took another bite, then another, each one seeming to bring her back to herself. "It's good," she whispered, and Marcus had to grip the edge of the counter to keep from crying himself. "I'm glad," he said. "Would you like to learn how to make them? I could teach you what I know, and maybe you could teach me what your grandmother taught you." Aiyana looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, he saw something other than pain in her eyes. There was curiosity there, and the faintest glimmer of hope. "Okay," she said. That night, as Marcus lay in bed listening to the sounds of the desert, he thought about Aiyana and how she would have loved this girl. He thought about the long road ahead, the challenges they would face, and the trust that would need to be built 1 meal at a time. But for the first time in 3 weeks, Aiyana had eaten, and, more importantly, she had remembered that she was not alone in the world. She carried within her the wisdom of her grandmother, the strength of her people, and now, the care of someone who understood that healing comes in many forms. In the guest room, Aiyana lay awake too, holding the turquoise stone, and thinking about the corn cakes. They had tasted like home, like belonging, like the possibility that, maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to live without her grandmother. The ranch felt different from the children's home. It felt like a place where memories were honored, where the past wasn't something to be forgotten but something to be treasured and passed down. Outside her window, she could see Storm moving around in the pasture, and she found herself wondering what it would feel like to touch the horse's soft nose, to whisper secrets into her ear, the way she used to do with her grandmother's old dog. Tomorrow, she thought, maybe tomorrow she would be brave enough to try. Learning to trust the next morning. Marcus woke to find Aiyana already sitting on the front porch, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Had the turquoise stone in her hand, turning it over and over between her fingers. "Good morning," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "Did you sleep okay?" She nodded, then surprised him by speaking. "The mountains look like they're on fire." Aiyana used to say the same thing, Marcus replied. She'd get up early just to watch the sunrise. Said it was the most beautiful thing in the world. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the desert wake up around them. A roadrunner darted across the yard, and Jake lifted his head to watch it pass. In the distance, a coyote called to its pack, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. "Are you hungry?" Marcus asked eventually. Aiyana considered this, then nodded. Could we make the corn cakes again?" "Of course. But first, let me show you something." He led her to a small garden behind the house, where Aiyana had planted traditional crops: corn, beans, and squash growing together in the Native American tradition known as the Three Sisters. The corn stalks were tall and green, the beans climbing up their length, while squash plants spread their broad leaves across the ground. "My wife learned this from her great-grandmother," Marcus explained. "The three plants help each other grow. The corn provides a structure for the beans add nitrogen to the soil, and the squash leaves keep the weeds down and the soil moist." Aiyana knelt beside the garden, her fingers gently touching the corn leaves. "Shimei Essen had a garden like this," she said softly. "She said the plants were sisters, that they took care of each other. Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise woman." She was. Aiyana's voice was barely above a whisper. She knew all the old stories, all the old ways. She said I was supposed to learn them, to carry them forward. But now, double quotes, "now, you think they died with her?" Aiyana nodded, tears threatening to spill over. "But you're still here," Marcus said gently. "And you remember the stories, the recipes, the way she made you feel safe. That's all still inside you. It didn't die with her." They harvested some corn together, Aiyana showing Marcus how her grandmother had taught her to test the kernels for ripeness. In the kitchen, she watched intently as he began to prepare the corn, then stepped forward. "May I?" she asked. Marcus handed her the grinding stone, and Aiyana began to work the corn with movements that seemed instinctive, passed down through generations. As she ground the corn, she began to speak tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. "Shima Essen said that when we prepare food, we put our prayers into it. Our hopes, our love, our wishes for the people who will eat it." She paused, looking up at Marcus. She said that's why her food always tasted like home. "What prayers are you putting into this corn?" Marcus asked. Aiyana thought for a moment. "I'm praying that, that I can remember her without it hurting so much. And I'm praying that maybe, someday, I can teach someone else the way she taught me." As the days passed, a routine developed. Mornings were spent in the garden, or with the animals. Aiyana slowly grew more comfortable with Storm, eventually working up the courage to brush the mare's coat, while Marcus cleaned the stall. The horse seemed to sense the girl's fragility, standing perfectly still and occasionally nuzzling her shoulder gently. Afternoons were for cooking. Marcus would prepare the ingredients, but Aiyana took over more and more of the actual preparation. She taught him to make acorn flour, showing him how to leach the bitterness from the ground acorns using a method her grandmother had learned from her own mother. She showed him how to prepare wild greens, how to season beans with desert sage, how to make a healing tea from pinyon pine needles. "Food is medicine," she told him one afternoon as they prepared a stew with beans, squash, and wild onions. Essen said that if you eat the right foods, prepared the right way, your body will heal itself. "Is that what you're doing?" Marcus asked. "Healing yourself?" Aiyana stirred the stew thoughtfully. "I think so. When I eat the foods she taught me to make, I feel closer to her, like she's still with me, teaching me." But it wasn't just the food that was healing Aiyana. It was the sense of purpose, the feeling that her grandmother's knowledge was valuable and worth preserving. Marcus made sure to ask questions, to treat her expertise with respect, to let her know that what she was teaching him mattered. One evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, Aiyana asked, "Why are you doing this? Taking care of me, I mean. You don't even know me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars appear in the clear desert sky. "When Aiyana was sick," he said finally, "she made me promise that I would find a way to help a child who really needed it. She said that all the love we never got to give to our own kids had to go somewhere. Do you miss her every day? But having you here, it's like she's still with me somehow." like she's helping me keep that promise. Aiyana absorbed this, then asked, "What happens when I'm better? When I don't need taking care of anymore?" Marcus turned to look at her. This small girl who had somehow become so important to him in such a short time. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I hope you'll want to stay. I hope you'll want to be part of this family. Even though I'm not really yours." "Family isn't just about blood," Marcus said. "It's about choosing to love someone, choosing to be there for them no matter what. Aiyana taught me that." That night, for the first time since the accident, Aiyana slept through the night without nightmares. She dreamed instead of her grandmother, but instead of the sad, frightening dreams that had plagued her for weeks. This dream was peaceful. In it, her grandmother was sitting in Marcus's kitchen, showing him how to grind corn while Aiyana played with Storm in the yard. "You chose well, little one," her grandmother said in the dream. "This man has a good heart. He will take care of you. But I miss you, si masani, Aiyana Saiden. Ik know, sweetheart, but I'm not really gone. I'm in every story you remember, in every recipe you make, in every prayer you whisper. As long as you carry the old ways forward, I'll be with you." When Aiyana woke, she found her face wet with tears. But they weren't the bitter tears of grief she'd been crying for weeks. These were tears of understanding, of acceptance, of a kind of peace she hadn't thought possible. She got up and walked to the kitchen, where Marcus was already starting breakfast. Without a word, she moved to stand beside him, taking over the preparation of the corn cakes they'd been making together every morning. "Good morning," he said, smiling at her. "Good morning," she replied, and for the first time in months, she truly meant it. Chapter 4. Finding home. 3 months had passed since Aiyana had first arrived at the ranch, and the change in her was remarkable. She'd gained weight, her cheeks had filled out, and there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. More importantly, she'd found her voice not just in speaking, but in sharing the stories and traditions her grandmother had taught her. The kitchen had become the heart of their new life together. Every morning, they would prepare breakfast using traditional methods, grinding corn by hand, mixing beans with wild herbs, brewing tea from plants they'd gathered in the desert. Aiyana had taught Marcus to make fry bread, showing him how to work the dough until it was just right, how to test the oil temperature with a drop of water. "You're getting better at this," she told him one morning, watching him flip a piece of fry bread with practiced ease. "I have a good teacher," he replied, and she beamed with pride. But it wasn't just the cooking that had brought them together. Marcus had begun to understand that Aiyana's healing was about more than just getting her to eat again. It was about helping her reconnect with her identity, her heritage, her sense of belonging in the world. He'd reached out to the local Apache community, connecting with elders who were willing to share their knowledge with Aiyana. Every Saturday, they would drive to the reservation, where she would sit with the older women, learning beadwork, listening to stories, absorbing the wisdom of her people. "She's a special girl," Maria Beggy, one of the elders, told Marcus one afternoon. "She carries the old knowledge in her heart. Her grandmother would be proud." On those visits, Marcus learned about the history of the Apache people, about the struggles they'd faced and the strength they'd shown. He learned about the importance of ceremony, of connection to the land, of maintaining the traditions that had sustained the people for generations. "You're not trying to replace her grandmother," Maria assured him when he expressed his concerns about his role in Aiyana's life. "You're helping her honor her memory by keeping the teachings alive." At home, Aiyana had taken over most of the cooking, but she always made sure to include Marcus in the process. She taught him to make pozole, a hearty stew with hominy and meat, seasoned with chilies and herbs. She showed him how to prepare nopals, the pads of the prickly pear cactus, grilling them until they were tender and flavorful. "My grandmother used to make this during the hard times," she told him as they prepared a soup made from desert plants. She said it was the food that kept the people strong when there was nothing else. Marcus watched her work, marveling at the way she moved with such confidence in the kitchen now. Her hands were steady as she chopped vegetables, her movements sure as she seasoned the broth. She was no longer the frightened, grief-stricken girl who had arrived at his ranch. She was becoming herself again, strong, capable, connected to her heritage. One evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, Aiyana brought up something that had been on her mind. "Marcus," she said, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "I want to write down my grandmother's recipes. All of them. The stories that go with them. The prayers. The reasons why we make them. I don't want them to be lost." Marcus felt a surge of pride and excitement. "That's a wonderful idea. We could make a book." maybe even share it with other families who want to learn about traditional Apache cooking. Really? You think people would want to know? Absolutely. There are so many people who have lost touch with their heritage, who want to reconnect with their roots. What you know, what your grandmother taught you, that's precious knowledge. They started working on the project the next day. Marcus helped Aiyana organize her thoughts, teaching her how to use his computer to type up the recipes and stories. She would talk while he typed, her voice growing stronger and more confident as she shared the wisdom her grandmother had passed down to her. For the corn cakes, she dictated, "You have to grind the corn by hand. My grandmother said that when you use your hands, you put your spirit into the food. She taught me to think good thoughts while I was grinding, to pray for the people who would eat the food." As they worked, Marcus realized that this project was about more than just preserving recipes. It was about helping Aiyana understand that her grandmother's death hadn't ended the teachings. It had made Aiyana the next keeper of the tradition, the next link in the chain that connected the past to the future. Social worker Sarah Martinez visited regularly, documenting Aiyana's progress and working on the legal aspects of the placement. She was amazed by the transformation she saw in the girl. "She's like a completely different child," Sarah told Marcus during one of her visits. "Confident, engaged, eager to share what she knows. You've worked a miracle." "It wasn't a miracle," Marcus replied. "It was just giving her what she needed: time, patience, and the chance to connect with her heritage." "The state wants to make this official," Sarah said. "They're expediting the adoption process. If you're willing, Aiyana could be legally your daughter within the next few months." Marcus felt his heart swell with emotion. "Of course I'm willing. But what does Aiyana want?" They asked her that evening, sitting together in the kitchen where so much of their healing had taken place. Aiyana listened carefully as Marcus explained what adoption would mean, how it would make their family official in the eyes of the law. "Would I still be Apache?" she asked. "Of course," Marcus said. "Nothing could change that. You'll always be Apache. You'll always be your grandmother's granddaughter. But you'd also be my daughter, if you want to be." Aiyana thought about this for a long moment. "My grandmother used to say that family isn't just about blood. She said it's about the people who love you, who take care of you, who help you become who you're meant to be. What do you think she would say about this?" Aiyana smiled, and Marcus saw in her face the wisdom of someone much older than her 12 years. "I think she would say that she sent me to you for a reason. That you were supposed to help me remember who I am, and I was supposed to help you remember how to be a father." 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Marcus and Aiyana stood in a judge's chambers in Albuquerque, officially becoming father and daughter. Maria Begay was there, along with several other elders from the Apache community. Sarah Martinez stood as a witness, tears streaming down her face as she watched the girl she'd rescued transform into a confident, happy young woman. "Do you, Aiyana, agree to become the daughter of Marcus Thompson?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Aiyana replied, her voice clear and strong. "And do you, Marcus, promise to love and care for Aiyana as your own daughter?" "I do, Your Honor. I promise to honor her heritage, to help her stay connected to her people, and to love her unconditionally." After the ceremony, they returned to the ranch, where Aiyana had prepared a special meal using all the traditional foods her grandmother had taught her to make. The Apache elders joined them, along with Sarah and several neighbors who had become part of their extended family. As they sat around the table, sharing food and stories, Marcus looked at his daughter. His daughter hand felt a profound sense of gratitude. Elena would have loved this girl, would have been proud of the way she'd kept the traditions alive, the way she'd found strength in her heritage. "I have something for you," Marcus told Aiyana after the guests had gone home. He handed her a small wrapped package. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. "For your cookbook," he said, "so you can write down all of your grandmother's recipes, all the stories, everything you want to remember and pass on." Aiyana held the journal against her chest, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, and Marcus felt his heart nearly burst with love. That night, as they cleaned up the kitchen together, Aiyana asked, "Do you think Shima Essen would be proud of me?" Marcus stopped washing dishes and turned to look at his daughter. "I think she would be incredibly proud. You've taken everything she taught you and made it your own. You've shared it with me, with the elders, with everyone who wants to learn. You've kept her memory alive in the most beautiful way possible." "And you?" Aiyana asked. "Are you proud of me?" Marcus knelt down so he was at her eye level. "Aiyana, I have never been prouder of anything in my life. You came here broken and lost. And you've grown into the strongest, most amazing person I know. You've taught me about courage, about holding on to what matters, about finding family in unexpected places. I love you, Dad, she said, throwing her arms around his neck. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. As they finished cleaning up, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them together. A lonely rancher who had lost his way after his wife's death, and a grieving girl who had forgotten how to live. They had found each other through food, through tradition, through the simple act of sharing meals and stories. But more than that, they had found something that both of them had thought was lost forever. The possibility of family, of love, of belonging. They had discovered that healing comes not from trying to forget the past, but from honoring it, learning from it, and using it to build something beautiful in the present. Outside, the desert wind whispered through the cottonwoods, carrying with it the scent of sage and the promise of tomorrow. Inside the ranch house, a father and daughter sat together, planning their next cooking adventure, their next story to preserve, their next step forward in a life built on love, tradition, and the unbreakable bonds of chosen family. Epilogue. Years later, The Apache Kitchen, Traditional Recipes and Stories was published. Co-authored by Aiyana Thompson, and featuring a foreword by Marcus about the healing power of food and tradition. The book became a bestseller, not just for its recipes, but for its story of connection, loss, and finding family in unexpected places. Aiyana, now 17, had become a sought-after speaker at conferences about Native American culture and heritage preservation. She divided her time between the ranch, where she still cooked traditional meals with her father, and the reservation, where she taught cooking classes to young people eager to learn their ancestors' ways. Marcus had expanded the ranch to include a small retreat center, where families could come to learn about traditional Native American cooking and agriculture. The Three Sisters' garden had grown into multiple plots, and they raised heritage corn varieties that had been nearly lost to time. Dad, look at this, Aiyana called out one morning, holding up a letter that had arrived in the mail. It's from a woman in Oklahoma. She says her Cherokee grandmother used to make corn cakes similar to mine, but she never learned the recipe. She wants to know if I can help her. Marcus smiled as he watched his daughter's face light up with excitement. This had become a regular occurrence: letters and emails from people across the country who had heard about their work and wanted to reconnect with their own heritage through food. What are you going to tell her? He asked. I'm going to invite her to come visit. And I'm going to ask Maria if she knows any Cherokee elders who might want to share their knowledge too. Aiyana paused, thinking, food is like a bridge, isn't it? It connects us to our past, but it also connects us to each other. Your grandmother would be so proud, Marcus said, and he meant it. The frightened, silent girl who had arrived at his ranch had grown into a confident young woman who understood her role as a keeper of tradition, a bridge between generations. Storm, now 28, and moving more slowly, still enjoyed her daily brushing sessions with Aiyana. The old mare had become something of a therapy horse, gentle and patient with the children who visited the ranch through various programs they'd established for at-risk youth. She's still teaching, Aiyana said one afternoon as she combed Storm's mane. Just like Shima Essen, just like you taught me that healing and learning never really stop. That evening, as they prepared dinner together, traditional feast for a group of visitors from the local Native American Cultural Center, Marcus reflected on how much their lives had changed. The kitchen that had once been a place of lonely meals for one had become the heart of a thriving community, where knowledge was shared, traditions were preserved, and healing happened one meal at a time. You know what I'm grateful for? Aiyana said, as she shaped fry bread for the evening meal. What's that? That I was broken when I came here. If I hadn't been so lost, I might never have learned how strong I really am. I might never have understood how important it is to keep our traditions alive. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes, as they often did when his daughter shared her wisdom. And I'm grateful that a scared old rancher learned he still had room in his heart for a family. As the sun set behind the Sandia Mountains, painting the sky in the familiar shades of pink and gold, Marcus and Aiyana worked side by side in their kitchen, preparing food with love and intention, keeping alive the traditions of the past while building something beautiful for the future. The turquoise stone that had belonged to Aiyana still sat on the windowsill, but now it was joined by other treasures: a feather from the first eagle Aiyana had seen at the ranch, a piece of pottery she'd made in one of her classes on the reservation, a photo of her grandmother that Marcus had helped her frame. Ready for our guests? Marcus asked as they heard cars pulling into the driveway. Ready, Aiyana replied, smoothing her apron and checking the fry bread one last time. Let's share some love." And as their guests entered the kitchen, drawn by the wonderful aromas and the warm welcome they knew they'd receive, Marcus thought about how Aiyana had been right all along. The love they'd never been able to give to biological children had found its way to where it was needed most, to a girl who had needed a father, to a community that needed teachers, to a world that needed reminding that healing comes in many forms, but often tastes like home. If this story touched your heart and made you believe in the power of love, tradition, and chosen family, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that even in our darkest moments, there's always hope for healing and connection. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you in the next story. Author's note: this story was inspired by the real challenges facing many Native American children in the foster care system and the importance of cultural preservation. While Aiyana and Marcus are fictional characters, their journey represents the real healing that can happen when we honor tradition, embrace diversity, and open our hearts to love in all its forms.